John. Thank you.
Okay, that's where we'll leave that latest update from the Premier Annastacia Palaszczuk. Let's go now to Rockhampton, where the cleanup continues and power outages, as we've heard, are still affecting thousands of residents. The ABC's Louisa Rebgetz joins us live from Rockhampton. What's the situation, firstly, with the power at the moment?
Well, as you just heard, power is a major concern up here in the Rockhampton and Yeppoon area. There's still 50,000 people without power in those two areas that were severely hit by Cyclone Marcia when she tore through both towns. The concern is that there's 1,800 power lines down and power poles, as you can see behind me. There's extensive damage. The vegetation around here is just not used to a cyclone that ripped through the town, so it has caused a lot of damage to the power lines around here. And Qld Energy says their focus today will be on restoring power to supermarkets, service stations and also substations. So we've seen over the last few days, ever since the cyclone hit, the night that after the cyclone hit, people were lining up at service stations trying to get as much fuel as they could, as many across the region just don't have power to service stations, so they can't be pumping fuel to customers. Qld Energy says the damage here is on par with that of Cyclone Yasi and Cyclone Larry, which took up to 4 weeks to restore power to residents. So they're warning that it could be weeks until power is restored to all areas around this region. So residents are being urged to be patient and to do whatever they can. It's very hot in this area, so it's not very comfortable to be without power because obviously air conditioners and fans aren't working at the moment.
Yeah, that's not fun at all. Is there any clearer picture today on the extent of damage to homes?
As you just heard from the Premier, there is a bit of a clearer picture on the extent of the damage, although it's still the assessments are still being still taking place across Yeppoon and Rockhampton. 2 properties have been completely destroyed. 100 families, as you heard, are now without a home. The damage is so severe in those homes that they can't live in them at the moment. They're staying, as you heard, with family and friends at the moment. But 434 houses have been damaged as a result of Cyclone Marcia, and across Queensland have received 6,000 calls for help as a result of this cyclone. There's also concerns today from the local disaster management group here in Rockhampton. There's some people without water at the moment, so they have put a water tanker in the northern suburbs of Rockhampton for those people who are concerned that they don't have access to water at the moment.
The impact obviously is huge as you've been going through lack of power, damage, people have lost their homes, lack of water. There has been talk about the Defence Force sending troops. Do we know any more about when that may happen and what assistance they'll provide?
That's right, the Australian Defence Force are being brought in to help in this disaster area because the Premier said that this is too big of a task for the local communities in Yeppoon and Rockhampton. We know that 50 Townsville troops are coming down, and that could increase to up to 500. We don't know when they'll be hitting the ground here in Rockhampton. There's talk, there was talk originally that it would be this morning, but that's now changed. It could be this afternoon or perhaps even tomorrow morning. But we do know that in Yeppoon, at the Yeppoon State School, we've got some local reservists from Rockhampton who've gone down to Yeppoon, and they've started the clean-up efforts there. The Mayor said that, yeah, up to 500 troops will be sent to this region to help in the clean-up. And on the issue of schools, it's still not clear whether or not schools will be open on Monday. There's a meeting being held at 3:30 this afternoon in Queensland with Queensland Education to determine which schools will be open. Obviously, extensive damage across the region to schools around here.
Okay, Louisa Rebgetz in Rockhampton, thank you for the update. Let's return to our top story now. An inquiry into the Martin Place siege in Sydney has found the system let the community down by failing to prevent the tragedy. Political editor Chris Uhlmann joins me live from Canberra now. Chris, thanks for joining us. What has this report found about the lead up to the siege?
Well, everyone remembers that fateful day on December 15, 2014, when Manharan Monis walked into that cafe and the siege which then lasted 17 hours. And in looking at what happened in the lead up to that event, and particularly the life of Manharan Monis, the two men who were looking into this, the head of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet and the head of Premiers in New South Wales, found that the system itself, at every step of the way, basically did actually work, in the sense that there was nothing that was a red flag on this man that would have been generated then or even would have been generated now. When you look at what happened with his protection visa or his citizenship application, well, if he applied now, it's most likely that he would still get both of those things. When you look at whether or not he should have been on a radical watch list, well, alarmingly, several thousand people are watched from time to time, but that he wasn't on the top 400, if you like, who would have triggered the constant watch of ASIO. Although he came on and off the interest of the list for ASIO, he wasn't considered to be potentially violent. The gun that he had is one of 250,000 which now exist in the grey market in Australia. Of course, it's illegal to have them, but there's a real problem there with that in itself. The bail laws in New South Wales, well, under changes to the bail laws now, he may well not have got bail under the changes to those laws, but under the existing laws, he would have certainly been able to apply and get bail. And that really shows that all along the process, all along the 17 years that this man spent in the country, and 7.5 of those years he was picking up welfare of some kind or another, that really there was nothing that would really suggest that he was a clear and present danger to the community, although at different times he had been a significant irritant and he'd been reported to the National Security Hotline some 14 different times. So, if you like, this report says that the system was not a complete failure. The system worked as it should, and that if we want to make significant changes, then that means redrawing the line between where we have it now in the balance between what protects the rights of the individual and what protects the rights of the community. So, and that's a difficult decision to make.
With that in mind and those various contacts, I guess, that the government and authorities had with him, how has the Prime Minister responded to these findings?
Well, the Prime Minister's response is that the community gave this man the benefit of the doubt at every single step of the process, and that's clearly something the Prime Minister isn't happy with. And interestingly, when he's looking at this report, and he'll make a national security statement tomorrow, he is obviously considering whether or not he will redraw that line between the rights of the individual and the protection of the community. And here's something of what the Prime Minister had to say.
Plainly, the system has let us down, because plainly this guy shouldn't have been in the country, he shouldn't have been out on bail, he shouldn't have had a gun, and he shouldn't have been radicalised to the extent that he claimed to be conducting an Islamist death cult attack here in Australia. So plainly, we need to re-examine the system and ask ourselves, at what stage do we need to change the tipping point from protection of the individual to the safety of the community, and that's exactly what we're doing, and I'll have more to say about this tomorrow in my National Security Address.
Okay, I guess we'll all look forward to that tomorrow. Chris, on another matter, the story reported yesterday about the Prime Minister proposing to send troops to fight Islamic State. What can you tell us about the latest on this story?
Well, that's right. That's a story in The Australian which said quite remarkably that the Prime Minister suggested to national security officials that Australia act unilaterally and send 3,500 troops to Iraq. I can't find anyone in the upper reaches of either the civilian or the military side of Australia's national security apparatus that can confirm this story at all. What they're saying loud and clear is that it simply did not happen. So it may be that at some stage we come across someone who can confirm that story, but at this stage the people who should know if that request was made don't know about it, which would lead you to believe that that story is wrong.
Okay, Chris Uhlmann in Canberra, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Rachel.
Let's go back to Queensland now. The ABC's Joe O'Brien is in Gympie, which has been cut off by floodwaters. Joe, we spoke to you an hour ago and you mentioned that you believe the river had peaked. Is that the case? Have we reached the top now?
Yeah, it definitely seems to be the case, Rachel. There's debris that's been left at the high water mark and the floodwaters have started receding from that. So there's about So there's about 15 businesses here in Gympie that have been affected by this. They're businesses that have been used to this. The Mary River roars past about a couple of hundred metres away from here. This is kind of like the backwater in these flood events. All of these businesses have been able to clean out all their gear. There is a bit of hardship, obviously, because I've had to go through this process, but it's not the kind of major event that we've seen in other areas in previous years where businesses that aren't usually affected by this sort of event are affected. But just to get a bit of perspective on just the amount of rain that has fallen now, we've got Mike Foster from SEQ Water in Brisbane. Mike, thanks for joining us. Give us an idea of just how much, but by what kind of percentage, the storages have increased over the past couple of days.
G'day, Joe. Yeah, look, we've had clearly a wild weekend. We're probably one of the good news stories, or the sort of silver lining, if you like. We've seen an extraordinary amount of water come into our drinking water storages. Over the 3 days to date, we've probably close to 11 months of additional supply, and by the time these inflows finish up in the next couple of weeks, we'll probably get a tick over 12 months of additional supply. So certainly that's welcome from a Water Authority's perspective. We've got a large number of our dams. In fact, more than half our dams across the region are currently spilling. They are spillway dams. They're doing exactly what they're designed to do, and they'll continue to spill well into next week and probably the week after.
Is Wivenhoe the biggest in the southeast, and can you give us an idea in terms of percentages by how much that has increased over the past week or so?
Yeah, sure. Look, Wivenhoe is absolutely the region's biggest storage, and when we get events like we've had this weekend, certainly the community's memories are pretty fresh from 2011 and 2013. Wivenhoe didn't actually see too much heavy weather go across that particular catchment. We are currently releasing water from Somerset Dam, which sits above Wivenhoe, into Wivenhoe at the moment, but we've seen Wivenhoe increase its capacity by more than 10% over the last couple of days, and again that level will continue to rise. And to give people an idea of the sort of volumes we're talking about, we are talking close to a sort of a Sydney Harbour's worth of water coming into our system over the last 3 days.
Right. And can you foresee any issues from that spillover that's happening at a couple of these dams, many of these dams by the sound of it at the moment?
Sorry, Joe, can you say that again? Apologies.
You mentioned before that there was several dams that were spilling over in southeast Queensland that you take care of at the moment. Can you foresee any issues with floodwaters because of that?
No, look, there's a couple of our dams. Barumba Dam, which is just outside of Gympie, which flows into the Mary River. We're certainly aware of a couple of communities downstream that have had access issues as a result of that storage overflowing, but that's sort of adding to what the rivers downstream are already doing. A lot of the communities that live below these dams are well used to them sort of getting to capacity and overflowing. Our key message over the last 3 days has really been they are spilling. It's important for the community to take just that extra bit of precaution until that spilling starts to ease.
And just finally, Mike, there's a lot of talk obviously about what's happened on the Qld. There was the release from the Qld Dam. That's not under your management, but can you talk to the preparation that would go into an event like this where there's a lot of water expected, and can these facilities actually release a bit of water ahead of that so we don't get these situations arising?
Look, so Qld's certainly not one of the dams that we manage. We're effectively just southeast Queensland, but look, what I can say that there are a range of protocols in place. There is a manuals of operation that are put in place for these bigger storages. I'm not quite sure of the full details of Qld, and I'm assuming we'll all hear a lot more about that one over the next week or so.
Yeah. Okay, Mike Foster from SEQ Water, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Joe.
And Rachel, so we're on the Mary here. Maryborough is downstream from here. There are minor flood levels expected of around 5 metres, but we're hearing that could could end up being a bit more than 5 metres. It's just unknown at this stage, but authorities are keeping a close eye on what's happening in Maryborough. And there are a heap of Energex trucks that are trying to get through on the Bruce Highway up to help those people in Rockhampton and Yeppoon at the moment. They're trying to get those trucks around here some way.
It's a massive operation. Thanks so much, Joe, for the update. Let's get an update on flooding in southeastern Queensland and an outlook of the weather ahead. We're joined by Andrea Peace from the Bureau of Meteorology in Queensland. Andrea, what are conditions like at the moment?
Well, the good news is that the heavy rain has now moved well off the coast. So we've actually got some sunny skies today through southeast Queensland, which is hopefully helping with the clean-up efforts. And we're not expecting to see much more than just a couple of showers or two for today, and then perhaps some showers again tomorrow through southeast Queensland. So no significant rainfall in the outlook, which is good news. That is good news because there are a lot of flood warnings in place at the moment. Yeah, look, we do have a lot of flood warnings. I heard Joe earlier mentioning about the Mary River at Gympie. We have just seen the flood waters starting to recede there. So we reached a peak of 16.6 metres this morning, now just starting to slowly recede, and we expect that to continue dropping over the next couple of hours. And we also have major flood warnings for the Burnett River as well. We're expecting to see those begin to recede as well through parts of the northern parts of the catchment, but through the southern parts from about Gayndah and south of there, we're expecting to see two peaks in the river system there. So we're asking people to just stay looking at the observations and stay very aware of their surroundings over the next couple of hours. Now, of course, authorities, the general public, we were aware that this cyclone was coming. It was quite unusual to have two cyclones occurring at the same time, obviously Cyclone Lam in the Northern Territory as well. How does the way that Cyclone Marcia impacted Queensland compare to other cyclones in recent history? Well, Cyclone Marcia was quite a far way south compared to some of our more destructive cyclones over the past few years. And as you mentioned, we had the two severe tropical cyclones crossing the Australian coastline within 24 hours of each other. That's unprecedented. We haven't seen two severe cyclones crossing the coast in that short period of time on the Australian coastline. So that's something that's new for us. But certainly the intensity of Cyclone Marcia isn't something that's new. We see Category 5 cyclones regularly, and obviously we have seen some devastation through parts of the Wide Bay, Burnett and Capricorn coast over the last couple of days. So certainly, Marcia intensified very rapidly, and that's what's led to the observations that we've seen over the last few days. Okay, Andrew, before I let you go, can you just recap what people in those the cyclone-affected areas can expect in terms of weather for the next 24 hours? Yeah, look, one thing I wanted to mention was that the air mass from about Yeppoon up to Mackay is quite primed today for some severe thunderstorms. So that area is an area we're watching very closely. If we do see severe storms occur in those areas where there is the potential to see some very strong wind gusts. So we will be monitoring the situation and just asking people to watch out in those areas for today. But no significant rainfall expected further south than there. And just on the Gold Coast as well, we do still have a severe weather warning. Ex-tropical cyclone Marcia is just sitting off the coast there and bringing some destructive, powerful surf onto the coast, onto the Queensland and northern New South Wales coast. So just asking people in those areas to be very careful over the next 24 hours as well. Okay, Andrea Pace from the Bureau of Meteorology, thanks very much. Before we go, let's quickly check the weather in the other capitals. Rain possible for Brisbane, a shower or two for Sydney, possible storms in Melbourne, partly cloudy in Canberra, very hot, and showers in Adelaide, showers and storms likely for Hobart, partly cloudy in Perth, showers in Darwin. Thanks for your company. I'm Rachel Papazoni.